Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and, of course, learning. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I am ably assisted by David Albright. We are both solution engineers at Salesforce, and we are both military trailblazers. Each week, we invite a co-host, or as it happens, 4 co-hosts, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session, I'm extremely excited for, is leveling up your Salesforce career with AI, tips and tactics from AI practitioners. So whether you're a bit overwhelmed by the recent introduction of generative AI and need some clarity, or you're an early adopter hungry for more, this is the session for you. I would like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host panel for tonight's session: David Giller, Mark Good, Ian Gotts, and Tom Hoffman. Ian should be along shortly. David is a Salesforce enablement leader and content creator. As the founder of Brainiate, he leverages his experience and expertise in Salesforce consulting to help companies succeed, unlocking the full potential of Salesforce and driving growth. David has also developed a host of free Salesforce and AI learning resources that can be found on his website, and we'll be sharing those in a moment. Mark is a Salesforce AI leader and the founder of AI Force Training. He teaches AI to Salesforce professionals using his platform, including everything needed for the GPT specialist certification that he offers, as well as guidance for Salesforce's AI Associate certification. His mission is to teach awesome AI and accelerate the adoption of AI for Salesforce, and we'll be sharing his site as well. Ian is the founder and CEO of Elements.cloud. He's also a tech advisor, investor, speaker, and the author of 10 books. Elements.cloud is a change intelligence platform helping customers and consulting firms accelerate time to value for Salesforce by enabling them to rapidly understand org configuration, documentation, and dependencies. And Tom is a Salesforce consulting practice lead at Crowe. He's a Salesforce MVP and is incredibly active in the Trailblazer community as the co-founder of the Pittsburgh Nonprofit User Group, leader of the Pittsburgh Admin User Group, founder of the Accidental Admins, in addition to his mentorship and numerous public speaking activities. It is awesome to have you all here with me tonight. Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, David.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, so we'll knock out some admin items real briefly, and then we will dive into it. Lots of good stuff to cover. So if you're joining for the first time, or you're joining online for the first time later on YouTube, I always like to briefly explain what these office hours are before we open the floor for questions and discussion. So these are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies. Absolutely everybody's welcome to join, to explore primarily non-technical, although we may get a little technical tonight, Salesforce career and branding related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So for this next hour, this is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please do keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. Robin to my Batman is David Albright. He'll be posting things in chat throughout, things like knowledge articles, job opportunities, AI information. And other folks obviously will be sharing as well. And if you want to post your LinkedIn profile in chat to connect, that's why we're here, please feel free to do so. If you would like to ask a question at any point during today's session, please, this is your session, feel free to do so. Obviously, I've come up with a list of questions myself, but more than happy to turn it over to you if you've got a burning question on AI that you'd like to dig into. I will do my best to monitor the chat window, and I'll also be looking for raised hands. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, just post it in chat and I gotcha. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded, so if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, let me know before speaking, and I will make sure that our expert video editor takes it out of that final recording. All right, so I am going to transition here to the topics, and let me stop sharing. And Dave, did Ian make it, or are we still waiting on Ian?
Okay. I haven't seen him come in yet.
We will keep going, and hopefully he's able to join us later.
I'll ask GPT where he's at.
Yeah, there's an Ian GPT. I think he made a GPT of himself, so we can go ask it too.
I wouldn't doubt it. All right, we will dive in. And so, what is AI? Right, we have to level set and kind of level our expectations on our knowledge of what AI is. And it seems that AI has erupted onto the tech landscape very recently, but in reality, right, it's been around for well over a decade. Before we can wield the awesome power that is artificial intelligence, we need to know what it is and what it isn't. And so I'd like to open our session by exploring this topic, again, to level expectations and set the framework for our follow-on discussion of how best you can leverage and harness AI tools and resources. And so the following question could easily be a university level course spanning an entire semester. So do your best to keep it brief, but how would you define artificial intelligence as it exists within the realm of workforce enablement, within our realm? And anyone can start us off.
Anyone.
I'll
jump first if you guys want. Artificial intelligence, as far as workforce development goes, it's artificial intelligence is that upper level umbrella term. It just means like when a machine can do or a computer can do something that we would typically consider that only a human could do. So it's using some sort of intelligence that it's been trained on to achieve human-like functions. And so underneath that, there's machine learning, and even deeper than that, there's deep learning. And then we have what we're talking about with this generative technologies, GPT. These are the transformers that are trained using neural nets that can pump out these text, images, voice, and so many other things. This generative AI that seems to be the big revolution that's on us. So artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. It's been developed for a long time. Machine learning has been around for a long time. Salesforce has actually used machine learning. It's been several years now that Salesforce has included that into its products and for creating predictions on its platform. And just now we have generative AI that's come along. So this is just sort of another layering on of intelligence inside the entire umbrella of artificial intelligence. And it's just an explosion that we're seeing of generative technology being infused into the products that we use. And so this isn't a Salesforce specific thing. It really is a total economy thing, that this new technology can be deployed into so many of the tools we use. And we see it happening, right? It's through Microsoft, it's Salesforce, it's PDFs, it's Word, it's like all the different tools we use. It's Zapier, it's including everything you can possibly think of. Canva has a tool now. It's using my son's, he's 7, he's learning on Duolingo. They have something called Duolingo Max where they use AI to do translations and helping you with learning. It's just across the board. It's all over the place.
Great explanation. Yeah, it's definitely pervasive across all aspects of our lives. Tom, David, any additional thoughts?
I think the thing sort of segmented this is going to think about is that, I mean, up until when Gen AI obviously first on the scene over the last year, the difference, a simple difference, maybe oversimplification, is previous AI was really predictive, right? It was drawing insights from and providing surfacing information based off of learning. And a good way to understand generative AI is that it creates, whereas prior versions of AI didn't. So if you're just trying to sort of have a couple of buckets to segment all of this in, and why it's so transformative is that generative is creating something new that didn't exist before.
Yeah, that's a great distinction to make. Thank you. David, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that artificial intelligence, as it relates to us as Salesforce professionals, I often tell people who have not used it before and might even be intimidated by what AI could possibly do. Like either, a lot of times people think in terms of extremes. Oh, it's going to replace me. It's going to replace my role. Or the exact opposite. Oh, it's just some fad and it's going to go away. And I often tell people that they should think of artificial intelligence in the same way, but at a much larger scale. In the same way, like most of us have gotten very used to using, let's say on the iPhone, using Siri, or using on an Alexa smart speaker to just call out the name and to have a command, where what we're really talking about, it's not just inputs exactly equals outputs, sort of like, you open a Microsoft Word document, whatever you type it, that's exactly what you get. And you may or may not have spell checker. It's not that. And it's also not like using a calculator where you put in some inputs and you get a direct, like a formula, a calculation precisely from your inputs will control the outputs. It's something that's far larger than that, where there's some synthesized quote unquote thinking that's happening. So the same way when you just turn to Siri and say, hey, remind me in 20 minutes or when I get home to do X, Y, and Z, it will do that, the connecting of the dots. As it relates to us as Salesforce professionals, that is absolutely profound in the following way. To me, leveraging AI, not only as a Salesforce professional, but honestly for any professional in any field, We can leverage AI as if it's our own personal assistant who is never tired, who is always around, does not always get it right. But if you want to do brainstorming on what is the best way to communicate the risks, the issues, the challenges on this project, or this idea, this configuration element that they want me to introduce, to be able to sort of synthesize that information in a way that is most appropriate to the challenge, the obstacle, the audience that you're faced with, it's tremendous. It really is a game changer.
Yeah, and I love that. I think overall, I think we've laid a good foundation for what it is. And before we go into Larry's question, Larry has an excellent question, and one that was in my list. So I'm happy to get to it about the ethical implications. But before we get to that, I just want to ask one question about what it isn't, right? So, and Dave's going to chuckle here because we often meet with customers in the Department of Defense who, like everybody else, in the world, is interested in this new thing that can potentially help them do their jobs better, faster, cheaper, but they frequently confuse it with process automation. And so they'll be asking for something that, like, say, a flow could do, and they're like, "Yeah, I want that AI." I'm like, "That's not artificial intelligence. We can do that, separate tool." So how would you differentiate those two capabilities?
I think, just getting back to, the idea of truly creating something. I guess that's not a great answer when you think, like, yeah, Flow can create records and do those sort of different things. But when I think about it, it's almost acting like a human in a way that it's creating something based off of this large language model, right? It's just taking these millions of data points and giving a sort of near human response and creating something that didn't exist before. And I think it's the easiest way to separate it from automation. It's not, some people really confuse it with RPA, and some of, like, the UiPath stuff, and it's really completely different.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, Flow operates based upon rule sets that humans set, and you can only set so many rules before before it gets bogged down, and obviously you're not limited to those rule sets with a neural network. There's
Right.
potentially
billions
of
that's a much better
interactions.
Automation is if this then that, right? And Gen AI is just, it creates from that neural network.
I think this is such an intriguing topic to build on the flows. Even it's really interesting because you can, and it's something I teach, is you can actually infuse AI inside of a flow, and it's almost like exponentially increasing the value of the flow itself, because the flow really is, it's the if this then that. You're building just a logical step through process, but now you can take this thing that still does like an input, a generation, and then an output. So there's still a process there, but that generation piece is open to seemingly unlimited complexity, and so you can do so many things with that, and it just, whatever your use case is. And that's the thing that's most amazing about the generative AI that we have, and the way that it works, and the neurons and how it processes, is that it can do so many different things. So really the big challenge, and talking about potential end users looking for use cases, really this is one of the hardest challenges that we have, is niching down. And you do have to do this with AI. You have to niche down to the point where you actually find a use case, a good business use case for it, and then keep the scope very narrow and limit it to that specific business use case, and then execute on that. And that's because it is so powerful, that you can do so much with it. You can infuse it in the flow. So I think it's, flow is if this and that. It's sort of on a lower level, and AI is at a much higher level of capability than you can do with a flow. Much like a human brain, like, we don't operate like flows, but our human brain can just do so many different things. So we're tasked throughout the day with all these different things to accomplish. So AI is very similar to that. And we need to task it in the right areas at the right times to get the most value out of it.
Yeah, and we're going to focus on the power here in a moment when we tackle Larry's question. But David, any final thoughts on this question?
So the way I see generative AI versus automation of processes is similar to, sorry, but I'm going to go back to my analogy of the Amazon smart speaker. Many of us have had this experience where first thing in the morning, you turn to the Amazon device, you call it out. I'm not going to use the word now. I'm going to try to not to use the word because it's in my room behind me, and it it'll probably ask like, what the hell do you want? And you ask something like, what's today's weather forecast? Or, play the whatever music or the latest news. And it will then prompt you, oh, do you want me to create a daily routine for you? So the first thing of putting in an input and getting the direct output, that is the equivalent of logging into Salesforce and creating a flow based on whatever you configure for that flow. That's exactly what you're going to get. Versus the generative AI is that next step where it's prompting you like, oh, do you want me to just turn this into a regular routine to automatically happen at 6:30 a.m. every morning? And when you say yes, it creates, again, going back to the Salesforce analogy, it creates that flow on your behalf based on the inputs that you gave, saying not only do I want to have the weather, the news, etc. first thing in the morning, but also on a daily basis throughout the week or only on weekends, etc. And it creates that automation for you. So it's two very distinct, closely connected, but very distinct aspects or features that can absolutely work together, but they don't always have to.
Yeah, I like the Alexa analogy, and I can say that because she's not behind me. I'm not in my office at home, so that helps to put it in good terms. We're going to get to Larry's question next. It's a two-parter. First part is, what are the ethical implications of using generative AI in businesses, especially regarding data privacy, bias in AI, and transparency? That's the first part. Great question.
Guys, I have a pretty passionate answer around the second question here, so I'll let you guys take the first one.
I'll go ahead. So essentially, I take the approach of it's somewhat of an unknown. We really don't know. OpenAI, let's say if we're talking about ChatGPT, OpenAI, the company that owns ChatGPT, they are claiming that the information is not being stored in their system and it's not being used. I don't necessarily trust them. It's not that there's any particular individual or corporation that I don't trust, but you never know. And the same would hold true really for any other AI system that I would use. So the way that I sort of find the right balance of trying to get the most out of the AI tool that I'm using. And by the way, I use many different AI tools. We could take that offline for those of you who are interested. For the many different AI tools that I use, I try to take out or generalize those confidential, sensitive, private things that I don't want to be vulnerable on. So if, let's say, I am struggling to create an email to a client about, let's say, their dirty data in Salesforce and the nonsensical request of importing more duplicate data and half-baked data into Salesforce, I'm going to go into ChatGPT and I'm going to give quite a bit of the background. I might give some background on the type of industry that they're in or the use cases of the types of processes that they're using. I'm not going to give the name of the company or the names of the individuals. I might describe the personality type that I need to sort of tackle in order to get through to their thick skin on a thick skull, on that particular issue, but I won't reveal any of the specific identifying confidential, sensitive, private details associated with it. And generally speaking, most of the time, it's very easy to do that. So long as you have the right mindset, it's very easy to do that and still get very spot on outputs from the AI. So that's my approach.
So you're essentially personally data masking, which that makes perfect sense. I know Tom's waiting on the second piece. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think just first talking about the privacy piece. I mean, this is sort of a work in process. When OpenAI rolled out ChatGPT, which was the most widely adopted tool on the face of the planet, at least the fastest to begin with, like the most users adopted the fastest, privacy wasn't as important. And so we saw a huge balloon of concern, which even came from Salesforce, which was like, hey, we've got this tool out there, but like you can't just go use it and expect your information is held private. And on top of that, the information that is put in could show up later if someone else uses it. So huge major concern, red flags. But I think what's happened as time has gone on is they've enabled features like privacy mode, so you can flip that on, and then supposedly, read the end user agreements, but they're supposedly not using that information and keeping that history and using it as training data. Then you've got Salesforce, who's negotiated an agreement with OpenAI such that OpenAI will not keep the prompt information or the information sent from Salesforce servers. at OpenAI and use it to train the model. So that's another step forward. Then OpenAI launched their enterprise solution, which also just layers on another level of security where, again, they're not keeping the information. They're not using it to train the AI in the future. And so we've seen definitely improvement over time. There still exists a lot of concern, such as the GPT apps that were recently rolled out. If you create a GPT app today, which you can, and you should dabble with it if you have the premium, go do that. Play with it, but the prompts that you put in the GPT app can be easily accessed by other users. And this is one of the challenges with language models that we have, that no one has figured out the key to the solution of preventing an instructional prompt from being dissected or pulled out by end users when you don't want it to be. And that could include personal information or proprietary code or name your thing. So there's from a privacy front, there's still a work in progress, but we've made a lot of improvement over time. Bias is also interesting to me too, because in fact, when you're training language models, you're injecting bias. And I don't mean bias in the way that we usually think of it as, but the weights and the weights for the nodes, or the weights for the neural net that are inside the language model, include bias, meaning like it's going to favor certain words if you use certain words. And that's how we use bias naturally to get the results out of AI. But the bias that is struggling is the kind where back in GPT-1, when the first GPT was launched by OpenAI, it was trained on books and books alone. So whatever book information was in that model is driving the results of that model. And so the way that the AI is trained over time has ballooned, and there's so much more information that gets digested into it. But now we have all of our typical human historical biases baked into this AI model, which we are now all using to generate solutions for future things. And so it's really a human challenge that we have that already existed before AI, right? Because we're all battling it ourselves, and now exists after AI in such a larger scale. No solution for it yet. I don't see anything, but personally, take the steps that you can, and companies need to take the steps that they can, and maybe someone will get their arms around that a little bit better. Salesforce is using the trust layer to try to help with that, and then I think language model builders are hopefully heeding the warning and trying to do some things, whatever they can, to train future models.
Yeah, it's a huge cause for concern, right? Because if you have ethical, or bias in your large language model, which of course you will, that gets perpetuated on, people take that for ground truth, and then that can perpetuate harm. I see your hand, Iris. Before we get to Iris's question, we're going to finish out Larry's, but I wanted to welcome Ian. Ian, great to have you on the show. We're just chatting about ethical implications of using generative AI in businesses, especially data privacy, bias, and transparency. So feel free to jump in at any point, sir. The second part of the question, and then we'll jump on Iris's question from Larry. I think Tom has a passion for. So it is. And then we'll get to Monica's question as well after. Or I guess we'll do Larry, Monica, Iris. Keeping track here. Second part of the question is: do businesses have an established governance program to ensure ethical practice?
Yeah. So I was speaking at a webinar with the International Association of Internal Audits, and you can imagine what their viewpoint on GPT is. And I think right now, what's a really bad policy and a bad approach is companies are basically saying no. And it's fascinating. Even my own company is planned on shutting off access to public GPTs in the next month, as they try and take a step back and assess what they're going to do. I generally think it's a really poor approach. I think it's the equivalent of telling teenagers to dress a certain way, not engage in certain behaviors, or it's just the more you tell someone like me, I'm not going to access it. It's like, great, I'm just going to pull up on my phone and use it anyways. It's so ingrained in how we work, and so I think you have to adopt a policy of responsible use and harm reduction. And I think that's just like you would with teenagers or college students, right? You would not say, hey, you should abstain from doing anything risky. Here's ways to mitigate that risk. And I think that's where everyone in this room, with your companies, as they're coming up with policies, you can have a voice in that, in helping define what are those acceptable use cases? What are the things that are going to generate value for the organization from GPT? And being able to have, Ian and I talked about this quite a bit. I'm actually stealing this from Ian's PASTA acronym, but you have to offer amnesty to people, right? You have to go and meet people honestly, figure out how they're using it, so you can even identify if there are, business risks, ethical concerns, privacy issues. Because otherwise, if you were to come at it from a place of, punitive or a punitive policy, I'm just going to tell you I'm not using it, right? I'm just going to keep using it on my phone, and you will never know. And so I think around offering amnesty and sort of making that a hallmark of any sort of governance program on GPT are pretty critical.
Yeah, I mean, to David's earlier point, it's not going to go away, right? So you might as well embrace it with intelligence and with a a specific approach that has been grounded in thought than prohibit it, because it's not going to be an effective strategy. Ian, any thoughts on that before we head on to Monica's question?
Yeah, I think what we're discovering is that the ROI is so big that people aren't just going to be told you can't do it. If you try and ban it, it's just going to go underground, as Tom said. And suddenly, if you're the CIO or the CISO, the head of security, who's worried about this, suddenly no longer is it in the public. No longer are people talking about it. It's now gone underground. And the first time you find out about it is when it comes back and bites you, and you've got a lawsuit of some sort. So I think it's about getting some sensible policies and understanding that this stuff. AI is not going to replace jobs. It's going to actually make people work better. But there are some quite narrow use cases, and let's work out what those use cases are, number one. Number two, let's find out who in the organization is using it and have an open discussion and go, okay, right, you three people are really excited about it. You go off and find some great use cases and come back to us. So lean into it and embrace it rather than going, we shouldn't be using this. Now, there are some sensible things, which is we shouldn't be putting accounting data in there. We shouldn't be being customer data in there. There are some sort of sensible policies around that. But I mean, from our organization, Elements, everyone gets access to ChatGPT Plus. We built custom GPTs which are internal. And our development teams, our product management teams, and marketing use GPT every single day, and we're seeing up to 1,000x productivity improvements. We can't walk away from that. So any senior person who's saying we shouldn't be doing this, we need to educate them a different way. And I think Tom made a very good point, which is all of you are part of advocating for that, and maybe you need to try and find the right words to explain it. So it's not like, can I play with the toys, please, Daddy? It's more a case of, hang on, there's something important happening here. How do we build what team do we put together to evaluate it? How do we move forward so we're on the front foot, not 3 months behind, which in GPT time is like 3 years behind, and make sure we're staying ahead of this, because this is going to be happening. It's the benefits are too great to ignore it.
Yeah, and kind of anchoring on your earlier point, right? So I don't think that AI is going to replace people either, or jobs, but I do think that people that know AI will replace people that don't know AI. So if you're not willing to leverage those tools to affect 1,000% increase in your productivity, well, then you're going to get left behind, because there's folks that will, and they'll just outwork you. Well, the LLM will actually outwork you, but so great points. And Iris and Christopher, I do see your hands. We're going to get to Monica's question, and then we'll dive into yours. And so Monica has a great question, very practical. Recently, I have used AI to write user stories, so have I, for one of my use cases from a click sprint, and I'm really happy with the outcome. I also heard that we'll be able to create BPM using AI tools soon. What are the other possible use cases in the business analysis area where AI can be of great help? Great question.
Shall I pick that up?
Yeah,
as we're in that space. So you think about having a discussion with a customer or with your stakeholder where you end up with a transcript at the end of that. We can now take that transcript. It can work out what the business processes are, so it'll write the process map. It will also look for the nouns in that transcript and go, these must be objects, so it'll build a data model for you. But it's not, so that's one approach. The other is you do a sketch on a whiteboard, or you take a screenshot of another tool where you've had a process diagram, and it will then draw a process diagram. But it won't draw it as it sees it. It will read it, understand what the process is, then look at the large language model and go, that looks like an IT request process. I know what they look like, and it will redraw it based on your content and its knowledge and draw a better process for you. So that's step one. The other thing you could do is, if you're a consultant out there, I'm not sure who are consultants, you know, when you get sent that 15-page PDF from a client going, this is what we want, feed that in, and it will then draw a process map off the back of that. We're staggered by what it will now do. So that's the first step. Second step is take that process map, and it will automatically build user stories off the back of it. Bear in mind, at each point, we're not saying it just keeps going. You as the business analyst need to add your knowledge, your expertise, your client-specific or your company-specific knowledge to improve it. When you're happy with it, push the button, let's have some user stories written. Again, you review those. So it's done a lot of the heavy lifting, but then you can start to revise them. On the back of that user story, it will then go, okay, I know what's in your org. Let me identify which metadata items you may need to change or reuse. So there's some of the things, and we're seeing every step that in the sort of idea to deliver it to development, every one of those steps, I think we can see significant improvements. And a lot of this has been, we're seeing in the last month, really, with some of the new capabilities that OpenAI's brought out in terms of code interpreter. And then the last piece in all this is we can feed it all of the metadata configuration, the metadata dependencies, the metadata complexities, and then you start asking questions. So a typical question we asked it was, the field stage on opportunity has got a bunch of pick list values, and it's got a bunch of dependencies on the back of those pick list values. So flows and reports and Apex. So we just said, we gave it the information and said, how long will it take to update all those? And it went, 96 hours. Okay, fantastic. Show me you're working. And it had worked its way all the way back down through the tree, working out all the related dependencies. It had looked at the complexity of all of those things. It had looked at the spreadsheet we'd given it, which is a typical complex flow takes this many hours to look at and fix. And it had done all the math. And that's really cool, but that's not the coolest bit. The coolest bit is now we've got this ability to ask questions of the org. Before, if you came to us and said, could you do that? We'd have to go and write the code. And then someone else comes with a different question and we'd have to go and write a bunch more code. And then someone comes with another question, we're going to write a bunch more code. Now we've got that capability. Now we can start using code interpreter, which is essentially you ask the question, it writes a bunch of Python code and then produces the result. So I'll give you one little example, then I'll finish. So we spent 6 months with the development team, not all of it, but one of the teams in our development cycle spent 6 months building what we called Analytics 360, which is a series of dashboards to look at your org. 6 months for a team, I think 5 people. We replicated that in an hour using GPT. So the whole emphasis about what we're doing now is changed. There's a lot less what report can you produce, but more how do we surface the right information into our portal so that then you can then apply the large language model reasoning to ask those questions. And I think it's going to open up the ability for business analysts to ask those questions which were just too difficult to ask, so you can actually make some better decisions. Sorry,
I love that.
Short question, but
no, great stuff. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark, Tom, and David here in a second. But I just want to anchor on one point you said, and it was an eye opener for me because typically, and I use generative AI, but I'll usually use one tool and then I'll consider like, hey, my task is done. And your discussion, you're feeding the results of one AI tool into another AI tool to refine it and do something different with it. So you can layer on those tools, which is an interesting construct that I hadn't before considered.
But the important thing is that if you don't start with really good analysis at the front, you're just compounding on, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And we do that as humans anyway. Someone does a pretty poor discovery call, which then gives us a poor process map, which then means we write crap user stories, which means that then they build completely the wrong thing. AI is just exposing that we just need to do a better job. And actually the core skill now is going to be the business analysts are suddenly the important people here, because they're pivotal in actually creating the content.
Having that human in the loop prevents your large language model from producing crap very efficiently. you got to inject the reason into that. But I'll turn it over to Mark and David and Tom for their thoughts.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in after Ian because he, I really don't want this to be missed. He said a few really important things there. And one of the things was that you can feed metadata into AI. And the capability to feed large sums of metadata into these language models didn't exist before. This is a very recent development. The context window for these AIs has grown significantly. I think it was 2018. It started out in GPT-1 was like 380-ish words that you could put into a context window. Very limited relative to what we have. Now we're pushing 100,000 words that you can put into the context window. And this means that business analysts in the very near future, in my opinion, are going to be interfacing with an AI that is injected with some summarization or some large portion of the metadata that's inside your actual org. So the AI is now, you could say, trained on your org. And so as you bring business requirements and you're thinking through in your own human brain what the solutions should be and working on the user stories, now you're engaging an AI who knows your org and can help you solution based on what you already have. This should blow your mind. And if you're a business analyst or anyone really, you should be looking at the business analyst functionality and role and capabilities, because what AI is going to do is it's going to cause us all to shift just a little bit and sort of like level up just a little bit. AI is going to sort of eat away at the smaller, simpler jobs, the simpler tasks. And we're all going to start sort of the way that we're doing, well, I'll go to this tool for that and this tool for that, using AI for this and that. That will become more and more such that we level up to the point where AI knows the org, AI knows what our requirements are, AI knows what recent historical changes were made, AI knows the business objectives, and our goal will be to go in and affect the right changes using this tool that can help us get there faster with more knowledge of the potential solutions. It definitely, it's a different world to work in. I mean, we're not quite there yet. Remember, this context window just blew up, it just ballooned, and we're just now capable of dumping this large sum of metadata into it. So the tools have to be developed, but we're headed that direction, and we're headed very quickly.
Sorry, sorry, I need to jump in. One thing, Mark, you said actually is not true. When we're passing all that metadata, we're not training the large language model.
Right.
What we're doing is, instead of when you type a prompt into GPT, you say, "Can you do this?" We're essentially giving the prompt, "Can you do this? And by the way, I'm going to give you all this information to work with." So we're not asking the large language model to ingest all your org, keep it and do something. What we're doing, we're saying to the large language model, "You are brilliant at solving puzzles. Let me give you all the puzzle pieces, and you use your ability to solve puzzles." So there's a big concern here, which is what's going to happen to my metadata. We're not doing that. You're essentially giving it a prompt which includes the context, which is, here's all the metadata, here's all the dependencies, here's all the whatever it is. Can you now look at that and answer the question based on your knowledge of how you solve problems? We're not teaching the large language model what your org is. We're giving it that information each time and it's working with it. I think that's, sorry, Mark, I don't want to cut across.
No, that's good. No, that's good. That's a clear distinction we needed.
We're giving the large language model that information every time it asks the question.
Yep. No, I appreciate that, because yeah, I think the word fine tuning and tuning and training, they can get really confusing. So yeah, nobody's AI is going to be trained, fine tuned on your actual org, but it's included in that context prompt. That's why the context window is so important. So yeah, thanks for jumping in on that.
And then I think that addresses Pearl's question about there being some kind of security vulnerability with providing, that access to that metadata. Tom, David, any final thoughts before we turn it over to Iris and then take a quick break for a group photo?
I want to call out one thing real quick, but Tom, if you wanted to say something, I'll shut up. Okay, so Ian, your response to that question was fantastic. I just want to unpack for those who did not sort of see the way I'm envisioning from what you described. I think there are three primary key use cases that you described in your response. And I just sort of want to make sure that everyone notices them, because they're often conflated and people often get distracted and it just seems like a big mush. The first one is purely the role of the business analyst as gathering the business requirements, synthesizing the user stories, synthesizing what is the process that the business wants us to focus on, and sort of getting clarity on that and documenting it in the appropriate ways. I would take it even further to say identifying the risks and identifying the other pieces of information that are missing from it and who are the other stakeholders that need to be involved, etc. But there's that piece of it of the business analyst from a business requirements gathering perspective. There's the next piece of it, which I will refer to as the configuration phase of I need to build out these custom objects and custom fields and validation rules, formula fields and flows, and asking the AI for recommendations or brainstorming with the AI and how to go about building out the configuration. And I think the third one, you did not necessarily use this term, but I'm using this term based on what you called out, and I think it's phenomenal in that regard, is helping with technical debt. And this is where you really need to use a tool that, and I'm assuming that that you've integrated, I have not seen, and I'm sorry, you've integrated AI extensively within Elements.cloud, because I know other companies like Metazoa have done that as well, where it has access to the metadata to see the fields, the workflow rules that still need to be moved over into process builders, the profiles, the roles, the permission sets, the users, and all of that type of stuff in order to identify the technical debt. Help me find the clutter, the conflicting validation rules, the conflicting rules, the pieces of automation that aren't being used anymore, like any of that type of stuff of identifying, unpacking, and even figuring out how to best address those technical debt elements. So those are the three primary areas. And honestly, we could probably even expand it more for the typical Salesforce admin, probably be even way more than that. But those three are pivotal, I think.
Yeah, it's a great extrapolation. And I like the distinctions that you made. All right, this is good stuff. I'm enjoying the conversation. We are going to turn it over to Iris, and then Christopher, and then Megan. But after Iris, we'll break for that quick group photo. So Iris, you have the floor. Great to see you.
Thank you so much. And what an amazing panel. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. And I absolutely love what you guys are sharing with us, all of your knowledge. I'm like, we are in the room with the AI gods. Thank you. But I'm going to bring it back for a second, because as much as you guys say about how much AI can do, I'm here sitting as like somebody who's looking for that, maybe that first Salesforce role, and a lot of new people in the ecosystem. And they're like, so where do we fit in? Because where a person like maybe a senior business analyst was going to maybe take a little longer to do those jobs and then have like an assistant who would learn. Now this senior business analyst, Ian, you blew my mind. I was like, okay, they can do it all. Where are they going to need that assistant where they're going to have that entry level person to grow and fill in those jobs?
Great question.
So I think that is a very natural concern, which is if you're taking away what seems more like those junior entry level jobs, and how on earth are we ever going to grow the more senior people? But I don't think it's we are replacing people with AI necessarily. If we're giving AI to people who understand how to use it, then what's happened is we've just taken everything up a level. So instead of Iris hiring you and going, I want you to build me a spreadsheet, then try and find out which permission sets and do all that, like build me a pivot table, do all that. Instead, we're going, AI will help you ask the questions, and rather than you building the spreadsheets, but you still need to be there asking the questions and then helping me interpret the answers. So I think what will happen is we'll move from being right down in the detail of trying to understand how permission sets and profiles work, but then start to think about what are the questions that we're asking and get better at asking those prompts. Because some things will, when I describe that cycle, some of those things we call AI integrated, which is we've built them into the application. it says, do you want to auto-generate a process diagram or not? That's part of the application. But there are other bits which are co-pilots where you're asking the questions just like you would have ChatGPT. And therefore, the skill is about asking the right questions and understanding how to use that. So therefore, starting to understand how to work with GPT, ask questions, refine prompts, so you're getting better and better answers. So you understand how that will be a valuable skill, which you can go, yeah, I've got my cert, but actually AI is coming in and I now know how to ask the questions of AI, which maybe some of those other people don't.
I love that. And I was going to ask, like, what was the best way to prepare, especially when it feels like it's changing like every 30 seconds. And don't get me wrong, I am well in there with my chat GPTs and my GPT-4. I've lost my mind with it. But it's like, how do we encourage new trailblazers to learn how to do the prompts and all of those wonderful things?
I think there's a misconception, and I know it was a hot topic on LinkedIn within the some ecosystem personalities a few weeks ago, and that to take it out of Salesforce and maybe think about it, and maybe one of the trades, and the equivalent of saying build me a house, right? And that carpenters won't be required. You won't know how to make joints or how to reinforce walls unless you don't need to do it because GPT will do it all. And I think the difference is really, instead of having to go out and cut down your own tree and hand the wood into its final form in order to then do the carpentry, that's what GPT is doing. It's not going to remove the need for the knowledge of how to apply the skills. It's not going to remove, the need for really expert level understanding of your company and systems and Salesforce. It's going to cut all of that manual work off the beginning. So I don't think it's, I think that misconception of the idea that we're just going to remove the person, I don't think it's as pronounced as people think it is.
Yeah, fair
And
point.
Iris,
Mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Iris, it sounds like you're on the right track, by the way. Deep diving into the tool set, keeping track of the latest and greatest, watching what comes out from Salesforce, making sure you get all the AI certifications and badges. You're on the right track. So keep leaning in that way. Encourage others and your coworkers to do the same in the community. I think that from a up and coming juniors, the younger workforce, I think what's going to happen is they're going to end up learning even better than us, quicker than us, how to ask the right questions, like Ian said. So the focus will become how to ask the right questions, because guess what? We grew up and all of the information was stuffed into the internet. We had to go find it. The younger generation, as they come up and they're learning anything, Salesforce and anything, a lot of information is going to be available from these AI tools. And so they're going to be learning how to ask the right questions to get these responses and the prompts and the information out of the AI. So I think it's really interesting. I think it's to be determined what's going to happen with the junior roles. They're still important. The level of impact is still TBD, but I can tell you a lot of people that I've trained and a lot of the younger entry-level professionals that I've talked with and trained, they are all in on AI and they are loving the tool set to be able to level up faster. And they are leveling up so much faster. So it's really interesting dynamic and market shift, what's going on in the talent space right now. But to be determined what the final impact is going to be on juniors.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll throw out one quick resource. Obviously, there's tons of resources, and each of the folks on the call has their own resources, which we've shared in chat, and feel free to make full use of those. Trailhead has I think it's called Prompt Fundamentals, AI Prompt Fundamentals. And that was just a very quick module that really turned around my use of ChatGPT to make it much more effective, because I was asking just bad questions and I was like, oh, this isn't doing much for me. And when I figured out how to ask, correctly and provide it with background and context and ground my prompt, wow, then it was off to the races and I was getting great stuff. We're going to take a quick break to snap a group photo. So if you want to join the group photo, go ahead and hold your comments temporarily. And unmute your video, and you don't have to if you don't want to. We'll go ahead and share this on social media so that everyone can always be branding. And David, if you'll back me up on the photo taking, which I think is what you're doing right now, that'd be awesome. And let me just open up my picture tool here. There we go. All right. Thanks. There we go. All right, count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Awesome. All right, so we've got a couple questions. Carrie, I saw yours in chat, and I'm wanting. Hopefully, we'll have time to get to that one as well. So I think Christopher, you're up, then Megan, then Carrie.
Sorry, my question was from so long ago that now it's kind of irrelevant. I will say I am loving the conversation. It's a fun dynamic. It's making me think, and I will say I have a comment that I think the folks here who are on the call are at that cutting edge, and I think the viewpoints reflect that a lot more. Maybe call it bias, but maybe just call it, you know, you're just so far along the path that I know that when I was even in a few months ago in the consultancy where I was at, very few people were taking advantage of GPT. Maybe they dabble a little here, a little there, but unlike with Ian or Mark or Tom or even David, their organizations are not making use of this policy. It hasn't, I mean, and consultancies really are, they're all about what's making me money. And if they're seeing it make them money, they'll use it, although they can tend to be a bit conservative on that. It's made me money in the past, so I will continue using this framework to make me money now. And that's kind of the edge that we're working with. I think it's less the junior people who are using it that are going to make it press sort of through Salesforce. It's going to be the CEOs and some of the driving forces at the executive level who say we're going to use it throughout the organization. We have to have these conversations because otherwise those conversations don't happen. I mean, you guys were talking about the having to talk about how we use it. It's not happening in most places yet. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just had it out there. I mean, so I work with a lot of sort of, and even my own company, like, you know, when we're looking at the enterprise level, there is so much value. And I think for the office of the CEO, you know, how we're going to use Gen AI is a #1 priority. However, the #1 priority for chief risk officers, chief audit officers, chief or CISOs is how do we protect our organizations from the risks presented by AI. And right now, you're in a world where there's no regulation, and you know Washington is going to be drafting even more. We have all sorts of lawsuits going against a lot of the public GPTs because of how they train their models, and companies are standing on the sidelines because, I mean, you move too fast too early, and you could be having an asteroid-like risk to your organization, depending on which way regulation, lawsuits, and all other things are settled. So I think it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because we all know it, the value of it, and I think CEOs and operating officers are ready to go. But you have this other side, and rightly so, right? They're looking to protect the sort of legacy or the enduring capability of an organization, and right now they're opposed.
Yeah, it's great points and great discussion, and risk definitely factors into that. So I appreciate that, Christopher, and thanks so much, Tom. We're going to get to Megan's question and hopefully have time for Carrie's before we close out. Go ahead, Megan. And you're on mute right now.
I need AI to help me freaking navigate. First of all, who's going with me to New York next week? Go ahead, raise your hands, raise your hands. Yes. Sweet, I'll see you all there. Second, I just wanted to talk about, like, we were discussing about like junior, like entry level people coming in. And the one argument I would say is like, there may be junior level roles coming in, but they need to come in with AI. They need to come in ready to grab it and go with it. I have been doing a volunteer thing teaching, Iris knows about this, with a group teaching non-native English speakers how to use AI to study for Salesforce. And not only that, I'm randomly talking to people about biases, and hallucinations. I met a marketing PR chick for Pinterest at my daughter's soccer game, and I had to give her a rundown on how AI was coming in, because even Pinterest is now making them take classes on ethics and AI because they're trying to incorporate it with all of their bottles and promoters and things like that. So I just wanted to point that out. But the one question I do have, we were talking about how the org becomes so good at one thing. Where are we going to start finding our flashes of brilliance? If an org gets so specialized and it does such a good job and it does exactly what you need it to do to give you like this perfect org that's giving you everything for your business, is it really going to give you any room to help you expand?
I think this is a really fascinating question. I think we have this mental thought of like, well, there's this perfect state of business, and if AI can help us get there, then what are we doing? But the nature of business is such that it's ever changing. There's always new threats and always new opportunities and always new tech, and AI is a great example. There's always new things going on. The market is constantly changing, and so businesses are constantly adapting to that. And because of that constant state of change, businesses are always having to change. So people are always going to have to be, on the stage and affecting that change, making that change take place. So AI, I think, is just here to help us accomplish that. What will happen is there will be efficiency improvements, quality of change improvements. Imagine all the wasted meetings that we have, all the wasted efforts we put into projects that fail. These are the kinds of things that will slow down, ideally. And if we use AI correctly and it gets better and better and better, we'll be able to hopefully manufacture faster, produce faster, engage smarter, have better customer experiences. Okay, I sound like a Salesforce commercial, so I'll stop. But it's going to be a great thing. There's no sort of like in a perfect state where we don't have to do anything.
And the last thing I'll say that you guys talked about earlier is just to foot stomp it, is the fundamentals are important. Like, you can have help writing a formula, but do you know exactly what you need in that formula? Why are you writing that formula? So it can give you a formula that works. Does it work the best way? I don't know how many times you can ask ChatGPT to give you something, and it could give you 3 different answers. So if you don't already have the basics, then it's not that helpful. If you're having to ask it 3 times, or you could have just known how to do it, and do you know that what it gave you was exactly what you wanted?
Think of AI as that bright 18-year-old male intern, I'm deliberately using male, who is really efficient, super enthusiastic, not necessarily right, but never in doubt.
Always thinks he knows everything.
Absolutely.
100%. Except Bard will tell me it can't do it. And ChatGPT will give you an answer every time. Whether it's right or wrong, Bard will say, I'm an AI, blah, blah, blah. I can't do that. I asked it to translate something for me today, and it said it couldn't do it. And then ChatGPT actually broke it down for me and gave me the entire thing. So they're also finicky.
But also, I think a lot of people were still thinking about using ChatGPT as Google search on steroids. Tell me how to do this. The real power of AI and the things that I've talked about is its ability to solve puzzle pieces.
Right.
So I'll give you this information, bring it back and do something with that. So could you, I'll take a metadata. I'll give you look at my org, tell me all the automation and tell me what APIs there are, and deliver that as a stacked bar chart. So when the next release comes out, I understand which automation I need to worry about. This is not saying help me write a flow. This is actually doing some high level stuff. So I'd like to pick 2 points up. One is, when you ask about where's the innovation going to come from, the innovation is because we'll have the time to be innovative and think about it. We're not going to go, AI told me to do this. It's the other way around. It's us going, if I don't have to be building a pivot table in a spreadsheet, I can spend time thinking about, wow, I've had 15 customer calls and they've all suggested we do different things, and AI's summarized them for me, and I can see a different way forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing was the comment about junior people in AI. I would suggest knowing AI is not enough. That's knowledge. Yeah. You want experience, which is how do you apply it. So if you're there, whatever level you are in terms of your knowledge of AI, start using it for a particular use case. So it's no longer going, I know I've asked some questions of ChatGPT, but get to a point where you go, I found it's really good at, pick an area. I've asked it to start writing me proposals. I've asked it to start writing taking data and building and organizing it and building it back out as a chart for me so I can do analysis. Start using it in quite a meaningful way that's associated with the roles that you're chasing, and then you've got something that's marketable. Simply being able to go, I've typed stuff into GPT and I know how the answers come out. Yeah, okay, that's table stakes in another month or so. So dig in and actually pick some particular use cases so you can then have a conversation with someone and go, oh, I've used it for this and this is how I made it work. So you've actually got a proper conversation you can have at an interview to really demonstrate not just knowledge but experience.
So I have one more thing because Ian's here. So how important are you? So I've been encouraging, because so many people have missed description fields. I'm in an org that I haven't been in before, but it's been around for a while, and a lot of the things don't even have descriptions in, so you don't necessarily know what it was for. So I've been trying to, where are my HE people? I'm like, yeah, but just like reminding, like, we need descriptions, because if we ever do pull AI, where is it going to pull the information? So is that something that we're pushing even more now to people, since this is going to be kind of scraping the orgs?
Absolutely. So two things. One is make sure the labels that represent what the things do. Secondly, write descriptions. We've written a standard for how to write descriptions, because bear in mind now, AI is reading your descriptions. Okay, it doesn't understand nuance. It doesn't understand your weird company acronyms. So again, you need to you need to write it in a way that makes sense. Everyone seems to be leaving. Is it just the two of us?
Nope, we're all here.
I'm sticking
Right.
around.
Everyone's video switched off. It's like the whole world was closing down in front of me. So, I'll post the link to the metadata description definition-y thing which we wrote. So yes, descriptions are super important, and you're on mute.
Awesome comments, Megan, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And on that note, folks, to be respectful of our co-host time, I know we have additional questions in the chat, and I see hands raised, but we're going to go ahead and close the session out so folks can get some dinner. So before we do that, I really wanted to thank Mark, Tom, David, and Ian for the past hour, which was amazing. I am literally probably 17% smarter than I was when I joined the session. And really appreciate you sharing your expertise in the AI space. It's given me a lot to think about, and I know it has for our audience as well. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you to all of you for spending your time, your Wednesday evening with us, and we'll see you here in a couple of weeks for the next session. In the meantime, please stay safe.